It's like 40 hours.
Geez, crap.
Uh-huh.
Rubbermaid's doing okay? They're making money?
That's kind of
If it works for them, I guess it works for them.
It works in a way.
How did I get in this situation?
I don't really know.
If it works, it works. I mean,
What's he does?
Okay, let me call you back. I'm in the middle of the PhD. Let me call you back.
hours long, salary.
Thank you.
Oh, you don't want it.
All right, ready?
So we're going to.
Do we get, over the last couple of hours that we have been here, rather than what am I doing, an understanding of this is what I am trying to do, okay, visualization of the Lego, and then the fact that if there is a visualization of the Lego, I don't have to guess at what needs to be done. What I can do is create an understanding of how a system changes, right? And hopefully what this class can do for me is to teach me the details about each one of these areas. And if I can understand those details and I can put them together, I would be able to go into any process and say, I think the problem is here, I think the problem is here, and I think the problem is here. And I can solve the problem. Is that where we are? Are we okay with that? Yes or no? Ask me questions.
I think I'm okay.
Huh?
I think I'm okay.
And it's not so easy where I'm going to say, oh my God, let's memorize it. But you have the Toyota production system. I want you to understand, here's what I do. What does my customer want? How do I level it? Once I level it, how do I reduce my lead time? I reduce my lead time by doing what? Reducing the number of units I produce, and I need to balance it. In order to balance it, what do? I design a cell. In order to design a cell, what do I need to do? And it takes you all the way through. And this is the logic, because once you start practicing that language, all right, it becomes a second nature to you, and all of a sudden your language has changed from very general stuff to an explicit idea of how to fix processes. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a certain order that you go in? Do you start at the top or do you start at the bottom?
What I would do is typically, I actually start this way.
Okay.
And if there is an existing process, what I do in my mind is I say, does ORNL or Y12 have a lot of inventory? And the answer is yes or no. If the answer is yes, I say, do they do this? Do they do this? Do they do this? And what I do is put yes and no, yes and no, yes and no. And the no's kind of gives me an indication of where I need to start my problem. Now, should I start here or here? It is dependent upon the scope of the project that is given to you. See, if the scope of the project is, I want you to reduce lead time, there it is. I want you to create an entire system based on scheduling, there it is. I want you to tell me how to flow this through entire Y12, there it is. So it is then dependent upon the scope of the project that you want. Okay, and therefore, there is no more difference at this moment, there's no guessing. This may not be perfect, but it gives you the ability to think. Now, always remember, I think we discussed this on the first class. What are you really, really good at? Whatever you're really, really good at, you have the ability to understand it and articulate it. I mean, I've seen people that play basketball or play soccer or play something like this, and it says, my God, why is that such a special player? He or she doesn't run any faster. He or she is not the highest jumper. What makes that player so special? And what I've come to understand, and I'm not sure that I completely understand it, is they see the game in a very different manner. In many cases in soccer, I've noticed it's not where you are. They can actually visualize where you will be, and therefore they'll make the pass or do whatever. It is similar in basketball. Here, we're trying to do the same thing. You can do as a pedestrian, try to take each step and try to figure out what to do, but you're not seeing the whole picture. This is going to create for you the ability to better see the whole picture and see where you're going. Does that make sense? All right. So, I want to set the stage today because we have the next class period is where I'm going to start bringing in all of the equations, and we're going to start seeing, and we're going to take it slowly. So I understand that some of you may have seen equations or not seen equations, but we're going to take it slowly, and we're going to talk about, and we're going to put an equation, but until everybody understands and understands why we're doing it, we're not going to do it, but we're going to fundamentally prove how to do this. If it's possible, I'm going to erase this for a minute. Our first principle was reduction of lead time, is that correct? And at this moment, I would assume that we kind of have a little bit of a better understanding of what that means. Our second principle is what?
Variation.
That's our second principle. If we're going to have principles, we have to give our students the ability to understand what we mean by that. We just can't put a sentence up there and say, oh my God, there it is. Tell me what variation is. What is variation? I'll give you an example. I think we may have done this exercise. I would like you to take your pencil, put a dot. Okay? Now, I want you to do whatever it is that you can. The only rule is that you have to lift the pen or pencil, and you have to hit that same dot 20 times in exactly the same. Don't do that yet. Don't do that yet. 20 times. My bet is that you're not going to be able to do it. I'm going to bet you, I said all you have to do is slightly lift the pen and hit the same spot. I'm going to make you a bet that you can't do it. So would you please try?
Make a bigger circle.
That doesn't mean, a bigger circle means that you've not really hit that spot. All right? How many people did manage to do that? Why not? Did anybody?
It's close.
Pretty close. How is it possible that a simple thing like this I cannot hit that dot? is this a picture of variation? What is the difference between this and this? This is variation, but this is also variation. What is the difference between those variations? What's the difference?
One was externally influenced.
What's that?
One was externally influenced.
Very good. So we're going to call a name, doesn't make any difference as long as we understand it. We will say common cause variation. And this is special cause variation. Two different kinds of variation. Variation can be either kind. Which one is better or worse than the other? Common is better. I have two different types of variations because just like this is not your work, but very similar to your work, you have this kind of a variation and you have this kind of variation. Which is easier to deal with? Special. Why?
Well, I mean, in the example, if we knew why we weren't hitting the dot, we could do that, but we know why we had the special cause, because another hand came in and slapped it. So it's kind of a one-time or a rare occurrence, it's easier to isolate what the cause is.
So I know the cause of this variation. I inherently think, because I don't know the cause, that it's inherently part of the process. How many of you play basketball or have ever shot a basketball? How many times from the from the free throw line, how many shots out of 10 can you make? And when you miss, is it common or is it special? If you know, I've seen my son play, and so he says, oh my God, we have to exactly the, I don't know what form, but there's a form. And he's very cognizant of that form, and if he misses that form, he realizes, I missed the shot, and that becomes special. But if he follows with everything he's supposed to, and he misses it, it becomes what? Common. What is our job? Our job is to get rid of what? Which variation? The ones I know the reason for. And the other second part of my job is to learn so much about the process so that things that I don't understand, I can take portions of them and convert them into special cause, and then I can get rid of that special cause. Do you see what I'm trying to do? Special cause is, I know the reason, and therefore let me get rid of the reason, and therefore some of the variation goes away. At your work at this moment, do you have this type of a variation, or do you have this type of variation? Do you know, so let's describe. I mean, right now, we're talking about variation being this. What is variation in your case? Variation in your case is, I just got a document that's supposed to follow this format, but I got it in 6 different formats. Is that variation? I'm supposed to get something on Tuesday, but I got it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Somebody has to sign off on this, but somebody else signed off on it. We were supposed to use this material, but we used this material. We were supposed to follow, I can't remember,
Conduct of operations.
Is it ever possible that you did not? Never. Would that be variation? So, you don't have this. You have this. And you, at this moment, don't have the mindset to distinguish between what is inherent in the process and what I have created. That's first step number one. Would you not agree? What is the variation at this moment at your work that is driving you crazy? Come on, you can tell. You can say. What is it?
I don't know. I work at Rubbermaid, so I'm allowed to talk about everything, but one of the main variations that I deal with is the print on the barrel, the actual like logo print. You throw a lot of them away because they're too dark, they're too light, they don't have all the logo on there, they just aren't consistent with how they set their machine up. So the biggest variation we have is with our print on our barrel where it says Sharpie, we throw away millions of barrels a month because they don't say Sharpie right.
Why do you throw billions of Sharpies away?
Because they don't fall within the 2 quality gauges that they have on the line.
What causes those variations?
The operator, how they run the machine, how they set the machine up, how they set up their adjustments on their ink, how they set up, I mean, there's lists of the variables that there are.
So it is not a single thing like my hand. It could be a complexity of different things that lead you to that inconsistency in the print. If you know the reasons, I'm kind of picking on you now. That's all right. All right. Why haven't you fixed it?
Well, we implemented a process to fix it, but it's more time consuming, and so the supervisors just decided not to mess with it.
So, I mean, I'm just trying to be mean to you now. All right. So the supervisor decided that it's okay to throw away millions of Sharpies.
Right,
All right. So it's because it's taking too long, let's not fix it.
right. We hit our number at the end of the day for our product out the door, even though we scrap them, and inherently we build a scrap rate into our product, so we're allowed to throw away a certain number and it'd be okay.
You understand the point that he's making? We accept variation, even if whether we understand it or not understand it, because I am not measured by it. Where was I? I was at Brookhaven. They were building a brand new building, and we were talking with DOE at that particular time, and they said, cost in variation, the overruns on the building, we don't care about. Because we are only measured on the delivery time of that building. So when you look at variation, we're going to talk about it from a what? A technical perspective. That's what we do. But you have to understand behavior that accepts these variations is because, yeah, it's bad, but it is, I'm not measured on it.
Right.
What do you do with those millions of Sharpies?
We'll either donate them to schools or we just throw them away. Most of them just get thrown away.
Where?
Into the dump, they just take it and throw them away. pay
You-
somebody to come pick up our trash.
So you environmentally pollute.
Spring of class.
Huh?
Oh, I brought a bunch, I brought a bunch of parts that like all these were in a package that we we're gonna throw away, so I picked them up, but.
All right. Inconsistency is technical in its nature. How you manage it is based on behavior. We have the ability and the techniques to understand it, decompose it, and get rid of it. All right? Question is, at this moment, the least thing that is on your mind, even though I am going to show you that variation is one of the biggest evils in stopping your production. If everything was working fine, but instead of 10 minutes, we had 8 minutes, 9 minutes, 10 minutes, 11 minutes, 12 minutes, and then I just had variation, but on the average it was 10 minutes. That variation is going to reduce your production by 10, 20, 30, 40, 50%. It is the biggest evil that kills processes, but what is amazing is majority of the people in organizations are not even aware that such an evil exists. Okay, so now, what should we do? Now that I understand that I have to take care of variation, tell me what to do with variation. What's the first thing that you would want to know from this class about variation?
Or identify it.
Ah. Reducing is there, but before we reduce anything, could you tell me how to measure it? Well, tell me, and I'm going to throw some things at you, and tell me if you understand any of these.
That's variation.
How would I measure? Because unless I measure it, I really don't know what I am dealing with, isn't it? How much variation is there in your kids? In a, not between kids, in a kid. In your spouse. Come on, tell me. I don't know what you do every day. What does that mean? Do you go home and say that? The part of science is what becomes ambiguous and general and left up to discussion, we want to take that away and make it very specific. So we have measures, and I'm going to write a few of them here, because you're going to have to identify and tell me which ones of these do you want to start using at work. The simplest is something that you have always seen, range. Range is what? Largest minus the smallest. Is that a measure of variation? Should I write that down? Largest minus the smallest, or no? Okay. Standard deviation. Everybody know what that is? Everybody? Everybody okay? People saying, yeah, we kind of heard about it, but I forgot what it is. That's all right. We're going to come back. these are different ways by which I can measure variation. We're talking about reducing variation. I can't reduce anything that I don't know how much I have and where does it come from. So let's kind of talk about each one of these for a minute so that we set up our basic understanding. Range, largest minus the smallest. Standard deviation. I'm going to put something here, not necessarily is this true all the time. I don't want to kind of confuse you. What is this? What does that mean?
Normal distribution.
Variation from the mean.
So this would be what? Mean or the average. So this would be the mean. And if I had a perfectly symmetrical normal distribution, and I went one standard deviation, this is plus one standard deviation, see? This is minus one standard deviation, so this is plus or minus one standard deviation. See, standard deviation is that funny little thing right there, like that. What does that mean? That means that this is 67%, something around that, 67% of the entire population is going to fit into that number. And if I went 2 standard deviations, you see, a standard deviation, I'm trying to make this equal, see? And this becomes what? Plus or minus 2 standard deviations. What is that equal to? Somewhere around 97%. And if I went 3 standard deviations, sorry, that's almost 99 point some percent. Plus or minus 3 standard deviations. Does this idea give you some tremendous depth to understand it? So let's kind of talk about this concept. We're not making any calculations at this moment. What is the average height of people at Y12 and ORNL?
Pick it up.
5'7". What should we say is the standard deviation?
2 inches.
5'7". So are you saying, in essence, when I translate that, and I go 2 inches, 5'9" to 5'5", is that correct?
Yes.
What does that mean? That 66 or 67% of the population at Y12 and ORNL are going to be between what?
That range.
5'5" and 5'9".
It means I'm short.
You're 3 stood that.
You got in the negative 6 digits.
Third level.
Are we okay with this? Okay, notice again, I'm only today working on trying to give you some abilities to understand what those 3 principles are. So if I went down to 5'3" to 5'11", what percent of the population is there? 97%. And then if I went 5'1" to, what is it, 6'1", we would have 99% of that population. Now, given that I can tell you the following, watch this. I'm going to take another color. And I said to you, what is the probability that given that population, somebody is below 5.8. Can you make that calculation? Say yes. I can calculate this. If you tell me what is the probability or the percentage of the people between this and this, I can tell you. I can, given that piece of information, standard deviation, I can do a tremendous amount of calculations and predictions. The difference between this and this is I cannot do a lot of stuff with this. It doesn't tell me, it tells me the largest and the smallest. Who's the tallest person at Y12 or ORNL? 6, 5, 8, I don't know. Who's the shortest person? But I want you to see. So I take the smallest and the shortest, and I have this number, and I don't know what to do with that number. But is it possible that if I could show you standard deviation, that you can tell me a tremendous amount about your processes? Coefficient of variation, what do you think that is? Standard deviation divided by mean times 100. What does that tell you that this doesn't tell you? It shows you the relationship between the standard deviation and the mean. What if the standard deviation is this big compared to the mean? What does that mean? You have chaos. I've got, yes, on the average, people have $100,000. What's the standard deviation? The average doesn't make any sense. When you have a standard deviation that is really, really large, which means people all over the place, for you to be able to do what? Average it and say, the average of this thing is 12. Becomes irrelevant. Describe the people in your family reunion. On the average, what are they? From 1 to 10, how nice are they? Well, from 1 to 10, what is the average? Huh? See, I would not trust that number. You are just giving me a number that says a general feel is 5. But you got Aunt Jane that just makes everybody miserable. She's the one. But you see, this tells me a lot of stuff, but this tells me that if I have a tremendous amount of variation, because compared to where my mean is, that becomes really, 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 really bad. Now, the last, okay, and I'm going to bring these back to you to show you in detail. I've got these two products in 2 different processes, and I'm a manager. This side here produces this product, and this side here produces this product. And I'm the manager, and I'm going to call you in, and I'm going to say, Jeremy, you're the head of this department right here. All right? You got a 10% defective product. And then I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to say, you got a 12% defective product. All right? Not so good, not so good, but I've got $500,000 in bonuses to give, so I'm going to give it to this group right here. Is that fair? Yes. Is that fair? Yes or no? I'm looking at this group first. Why? Why?
Because we outperformed
Sure
group
we
two.
deserve
So our
it.
variation can be higher than the phone?
Because a higher variation really leads into defective parts. See, because if this was my process, if this is my requirements, right? These are my requirements. I could have a really good process, and all of my product is in between my requirements. I have no defectives. When do I have defectives? I have defectives when I do this. There's my defects. That's you. That's you. That's much bigger. So based on that, I said, oh my God, you're much better, aren't you? Do you like that decision? No? Why not?
They're just making cups.
Yeah.
Phone's a lot harder.
Very good.
Their defects cost a lot more.
Chose your
Watch this. You're absolutely correct, but it's amazing that we never considered that concept at work. Here's a key. What makes this cup a defect? What could make it a defect? It's a leak, one. What else?
Not stand.
It won't stand, two. Wrong color, three. Wrong size, four. What is that called? Those four things are called what? Hmm?
Default.
Critical to quality characteristics. Critical to quality characteristics. These, because this is how many? Four. How many critical to quality characteristics are here? Tell me. Hundreds? Thousands? So, of the thousands of things that I check to make sure that this is working, they got 12%. Out of every 100, they got 12 of those wrong. You got 10 of these wrong based on 4 characteristics.
But it still works.
Huh?
But it still works.
Are these two things the same? Okay, they're not. You would agree. So I have to give you a concept that brings these things together by taking 12% and divide it by what? 1,000. I take 10% and divide it by 4. I multiply it by a million, and I can convert it into a sigma level, and this is going to be a lot better sigma level than this. Defective, this is better. Sigma level, the process capability, this is better. My question to you is if this makes sense to you. If it makes sense, do you use it at work? So you still go around and say, Jeremy, you're a lot better because this is 10%. Don't you do that? How does an organization that are the basis of the science world or the production world of the United States do that? I'm simply asking a question. And it's not that you use it, but it has to be inherently part of your thinking process. So when I look at variation, when I am looking at variation, again, please don't mistake that we're covering a lot today. We're covering an understanding of why it's important. You would say, I can prove to you that if I have variation, and I'm supposed to produce 100 units, if I have a variation of 10%, 20%, 30%, 40% down the line, because we did a study for ORNL on a particular fuel for spacecraft, which is a fuel that needs to be produced, but the process is in place at this moment at ORNL. They're supposed to produce 1.5 kilograms of this per year. If we have a 30% variation, guess how much they can produce? 0.7 kilograms. Given everything else is calculated, but I have a variation that is 30% variation, whatever that means, I don't produce 1.5, I produce what? Close to 0.7. It is a killer. It is that silent killer of production. We don't, at ORNL, understand that killer. We don't measure in any format that killer. If you do not know that you have a killer and you do not know how to measure it, I'm asking you to explain to me, how do you control variation? Huh?
Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, you can't do it if you don't know what the problem is.
So then what do you do with variation? Come tell me, what are you doing with variation?
Just accept it as there.
Procedures. Use procedures to get rid
Try to measure it.
No, we just accept a certain amount of deviation and just know that it's a given. That's how we do it.
You have accepted it. And every one of you, every day, does a significant portion of work that you were not expecting to do that day because of variation. And you're living with it and it's killing you. How many of you have a fair amount of variation that when you go home to the office and say, I'm going to write this report, somebody calls you up and says, or emails you and says, you better not do that. You better come out here. There is a lot of issues. You can control it. I mean, life is not perfect to say, my God, if we did this kind of stuff, everything is going to be perfect. But is it possible that there is something that is killing us and we're not even aware of it, and we live with it and we die? You go home and you kick your dog because somebody did something to you at work. All right? Do you not do that?
No.
No? Are all of you really, really pleasant when you walk into the house?
Nope.
Why are you not pleasant?
Stressed.
Somebody cut you off the track.
Why are you not pleasant? I thought you were nice people. Why are you not pleasant?
Because you have a pot of energy, and by the time you get home, it's down to those last bits. And so you don't have. the
What
energy
consumes
to
that
be
energy?
present.
Are you, now I'm going to be mean to you. We're going to shift over. Are you under stress because you don't know how to do your job?
No.
There's supposed to be no pause. You would not be hired to do that job if people didn't think that you were capable of doing that job. You went through an interview process, didn't you?
My pause is because our job is dealing with all the loose ends.
Okay. What if in this class, to some extent, I'm not supposed to cover this, but based on what I'm getting a feel for, is to cover this and give you certain laws associated with production processes that, one, you can measure it, control it, at least understand variation. Would that be okay? So two things. We're going to teach you how to reduce lead time. We're going to teach you how to understand and be able to some extent control variation. Would that be okay? And the third thing is, the third principle that we have is we say we want to enhance the quality of life of people. Tell me, that sounds really, really nice. It's one of the things that you can go into a debate and say, improve the quality of life. Do you care about people?
Some.
Do you care about people?
Yes.
Which people do you care about? Most of them. You don't care about people. Tell me, it is not because you say you care about people. Tell me the last time that you stepped in when somebody was in trouble and had nothing to do with you, you stopped and you said, let me kind of help you. So what does it mean to say, I like people? If I walk around and I know she's struggling or he's struggling, and I say, hey, how you doing? You know, and walk away.
I think if you want your process to be sustained, that has to be something you take into account. It's easy to go in and say, change the way we move parts through a machine or whatever, through a process, but it's like you said at the beginning, if they don't have the buy-in for it, it's not gonna, it won't be a sustained process.
Very good.
It has to be something they value. It has to be embedded in those terms.
I think it's beyond that. It's a little bit, because if you do reduce the lead time and you do reduce the variation, okay, it is going to be of benefit to them. There's a little bit of less stress. But people are not going to judge you by that. People are going to judge you by the perception they have as you walk in and say, I am proposing this particular project. And in the majority of cases, you're going to talk about technical stuff, but you're never going to talk about those people. Because people are not that important. We talk about people being important, but we don't treat people as very important. Important is not because I showed up in class. That's my job. If I cared, then I would make sure whatever I do for you to become whoever you can out of this class and out of this program. That is the test, not because I showed up. I show up because I'm supposed to. People will judge you and let you do things if they have a sense that you are there to be their guardians. They will allow you to do almost anything if they have a trust in you that you are going to take care of them. But if you go in with a technical ability and say, let me show you lead time, let me show you variation, but you have a sense of, oh my God, I know everything, and I'm just doing you a favor because I'm going to fix this for you, they're going to shoot you. 95% of lean implementation fails. I implement something, you will implement something. When you come back a year, 2, 3 years later, there's no resemblance of what you have ever done. Why? Because you never cared about the people. You simply did a project, you showed it to people, you got a promotion, and you moved on. One of the things that I do is talk to my students at UT about something very, very sensitive because I want to make sure that they're very successful. In order for you to care about people, you have to understand what your biases are and what your prejudices are. So tell me, how many of you have prejudices? This is not something we should be taping. Because it is not politically correct to be able to ask that. But how many of you are? Who are you prejudiced against?
Lazy people.
Who are you prejudiced against?
Anybody's different from you to a point.
What's that?
Anybody's different than from you know.
To some extent.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, who are you gonna, so I'm gonna go into a production environment and I'm gonna improve their processes. Do you have a bias against people that work in production?
Sometimes.
I mean, I'm kind of trying to provoke you because I want you to kind of think, because I want you to be able to correct your behavior if that is the case. I'm not judging, I believe everybody has to some extent, so we're not judging that biases. I want you to be aware of it so that you can control it. How many of you think that people in production are not so educated? If they were, they would be sitting in an office. Is that not true?
There's a pretty big bias out there, I think, of people when you come out of high school, if you don't go to college, that you're not
absolutely
bright.
correct. So, and that becomes a different path, a career path, isn't it?
Yeah.
So isn't it leave you with a bias that, my God, so how can you design a process for people that you don't have any respect for? They're not going to let you. And they're right not to let you. All right, let's talk a little bit more. How many of you are prejudiced against the other gender?
Bring it.
It's not against women, it could be against men. I want to know how many of you do have that.
How many genders are actually exist?